Hey, good afternoon. I would like to call the May 30th, 2024 Measure U Citizen Oversight Committee meeting to order. I would like to point out that this meeting is being recorded through Zoom teleconference. Deputy City Clerk, may we have a roll call, please?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Committee Member Kane?
Here.
Committee Member Clark?
Here.
Committee Member Collins? Committee Member Kyrus?
Here.
Committee Member Silva is absent with notice. Vice Chair Schaefer?
Here.
Chairwoman Chanel?
Here.
All members are present except for Committee Member Silva and Committee Member Collins.
Pledge of Allegiance. Committee Member Kane will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance
To the flag and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, communications from the public. There is a 3-minute per person time limit for all general public comments on non-public hearing items. All who wish to speak, including committee members and staff, need to be recognized by the chair before speaking. Please state your name and item you are commenting on before speaking. We will take public comment for items listed on the agenda. And we have Pat Gregory.
Hi, my name is Pat Gregory, and this is gonna be short. I thought it was only 2 minutes, so I think you guys lucked out. All right, and I'm commenting on 6A.
Okay.
My name is Pat Gregory, and I do not agree that the city's budget is in line with Resolution 4703 and 31. According to the information the city provided, the city is paying nearly 1/2 of the entire police department's salaries with Measure U funds. This is absolutely not compliant with the Measure U resolutions. The resolutions state that there's to be a mandatory staffing ratio that equals approximately 108 officers. According to the ACFR, there are only 78, 30 less than the resolution requires. Measure U was to be used for adding officers, not paying the salaries of existing officers. The city is playing a shell game with Measure U by paying what should be general fund expenses with Measure U funds. What this means is that this year, nearly $8 million of Measure U money is being used to pay general fund expenses, existing police salaries, allowing the city to use this freed up money for who knows what. But on Tuesday, the city voted to buy a building. So I guess if there is someone trying to steal your car, should we call a realtor? The city obviously has money for real estate, but no money for the promised additional police. The only criticism I have of the police department is that they have not challenged the city for misusing Measure U, instead of using it to increase the number of officers in Hemet as the resolution requires. Look at it this way. The city has never complied with the staffing figures promised in the resolutions, but the city has spent all the Measure U money. What did the city spend it on? And why did they refuse to properly audit Measure U? It's really hard to show in such a short period of time how the city's misrepresentation of Measure U spending and the absolute non-compliance with the resolutions. Thank you.
Hey, Deputy City Clerk, are there any registered speakers?
No further registered speakers.
Okay, we will now move to the consent calendar. Are there any committee members who would like to comment on the consent item? Okay, Vice Chair.
The consent items are not listed here that I could see. The ones that I came up with is that what was presented last time was the fire department is way overspending their budget for Measure U. The city has failed to spend the funds collected in Measure U for safety. We've got a huge surplus. the police department hasn't hired the number of officers. And some of the reimbursements for the fire department expenses it was open, maybe put back into the general fund instead of being allocated to where the expense was in Measure U. Is that what the consent agreement is?
Vice Chair Schaefer, the consent is actually for the approval of the Measure U minutes as listed under item 5A. So it'd be for the meeting minutes of May 30th, 2023 and the meeting minutes of May 9th, 2024.
Right,
Right.
so what are we consigning consent to?
The approval of the minutes.
Approval of the minutes.
Yes. I believe what you're referring to is going to be the discussion action item.
So we're here and your comments go here. Yeah, so we have to do the minutes first.
And the minutes include what I just said?
No, the minutes would include the meeting minutes of May 30th, 2023 and the meeting minutes of May 9th, 2024.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments on the consent item? Can I have a motion to approve the item
I'll motion to approve the item.
and a second? Deputy City Clerk, may we have a roll call?
Thank you, Chairwoman. Committee Member Kane.
Aye.
Committee Member Clark.
Aye.
Committee Member Kairos.
Aye.
Committee Member Schaefer. Committee Member Chanel.
Aye.
That motion passes 5-0 to approve the Measure U Citizen Oversight Committee meeting minutes of May 30th, 2023 and May 9th, 2024.
Okay, we will now move to our discussion item today. Okay. Discussion, we have our action item, 6A, the fiscal year 22-23 Measure U expenditure review and discussion of fiscal year 24-25 Measure U operating budget.
Okay, thank you, everybody, for coming. My name is Tiffany Barnett, and I'm the Acting Administrative Services Director, also the Accounting Manager. And we're gonna go ahead and go over the second portion that we normally cover. Our last meeting, we did go over the ACFR for 22-23 and the actual expenditures that occurred during that fiscal year. But we also went over all of the items. We addressed all the items that were concerns, through the Measure U Oversight Committee's roles and what they're supposed to do. So today's meeting is to go over the proposed next year's budget and to receive feedback from you guys and any direction that you'd like to provide. So in your packet, you'll see I just provided the Oversight Committee roles again, just so that we know what we're going to be doing today. Today, we are listening to the proposed expenditures for the next year. And then the committee is to create a report, like a transmittal letter, that should be submitted to the city council for review and discussion at a notice public meeting of city council, and shall be made available to the public at least 5 business days prior to such public meeting. So we'll go over the expenditures for next year, get any kind of feedback from you, and then you guys we're going to be giving out budget detail line items, but those will not be available until tomorrow. And then you can review them, and then we'll come back on June 6th to have you draft and submit your letter for council. And then with that, I also did include the resolution, so everybody knows what we're bound to. And then I'm going to go ahead and roll into the PowerPoint presentation. So today's focus is to review the fiscal year 24-25 draft budget summary, review cost drivers and budget impacts, review the Measure U fund balance, and identify committee members to draft the transmittal letter to the city council. The first slide here is the general fund allocation methodology for 24-25. Where we do have all of our general fund revenue. It's about almost 75 million. And it does get split down into the general fund side, which is 58.5 million, That is further split 72% to public safety and 28% to non-public safety. That 27% is split between police and fire at a 2/3, 1/3 split. Then on the right side of the screen is the Measure U allocation. We are projecting about $16.4 million in revenue streams. That is what we turn around and budget for expenditure side. That is also split 2/3, 1/3 for police and fire. The breakdown is as it's displayed up there, and in the bottom is a little graph that shows how much is allocated to public safety, which is about an equivalent of 79% of all general fund revenues. And non-public safety receives about 16.4, which is approximately 21% of the general fund revenues. And I apologize that it's so very small. So let me put my spectacles on. So this slide here is the projected fiscal year 24-25 recommended budget revenues. So these are our resources that we will use to fund the budget. So as you see, we have provided the 22-23 actuals, what was adopted last year as 23-24, and then the projected ending balance that we're looking at June 30th, 2024. Then our fourth column here is what we're looking into the next year. As you can see, we have highlighted Measure U. So that's about $16.4 million that is being projected. Overall, the general fund resources are $79.45 million. And if you do look back on this graph here, it says 74.97. I just want to point out that that does include we do move out the transfers, the general fund overhead transfers, so that is reduced in that amount. So that's why that amount does appear different, but that's what we have to go based on the budget. So our revenues, we are going with the trend that HDL, who is the professional actuarial that provides us with revenue projections. It is a 2.1% increase for sales tax. Measure U is looking at a 1.6 increase, and property taxes 3.81, and followed up by vehicle license fee of 4.74%. So those are our main revenue sources, and they are expected to increase. So that is favorable. The next slide, and I just want to point out that the next three slides are like an actual cumulative of one spreadsheet. So to get them all, we had to separate them out. So you'll see that it does continue and flow through. So the recommended uses are our expenditures. And you'll see we do have it broken down by all departments. We did highlight out the Measure U and for police and fire. And you will see that their allocation is proposed as it is allocated for the 2/3, 1/3 split of the revenues. So the next slide goes into further detail and portrays or it lists out all of the one-time use of fund balance, and you'll see the items in yellow are what is for Measure U. The rest is for regular general fund. We are looking for police Measure U use of one-time fund balance of 3.66 million. That currently is proposed to be for liability premiums of 2.4 million, which is an estimated expectation that may be needed, along with the CityNet contract of 1.26 million. Those are the two items that are being used out of the use of one-time fund balance. And these are items that we would look to you for feedback and to see what your input is on those items. And at the end, our total uses for our revenues is 92,016,800. We are implementing what is called a vacancy factor this year, which is all of the vacant positions that we do have, and most of them are in public safety for police and fire. The probability of getting people hired in on time is probably gonna be about a 6-month period. So we are counting on not spending a lot of that funding, and that will help it with our salary increases that are being projected into next year. And then we back out the use of the one-time fund balance items that are 9.45 million. And that brings us into a net effect of 0. Down below, I just wanted to point out, there are some footnotes here, just to let you know, in 23-24, which is the current year, there is about 2.6 million that is being used for police. This includes CityNet. There are some facility upgrades. There are some external safety upgrades, vehicles, radios, flock, camera, and other items. And that brings us to the 2.6. In fire, there is a KME apparatus of 1.7 million, a fire engine of 300,000, Station 3 safety enhancements of 150,000, Station 2 fence of 100,000, Covell upgrades of 100,000, and then radios of 250,000. So these are more investments that were made with the use of Measure U fund. The next slide is our cost drivers, and these are the things that we're seeing a significant increase from prior year to this current year, so that we can identify what is really creating the increases in our expenditures. The first line item that you will see is anticipated labor cost increases of 4.6 million. This is to bring everybody to market. That does, it includes, this is all for general funds, so the majority of that is police and fire. There are some personnel in engineering and parks and library. But this is what we're looking at to bring everyone up to market. So that is a significant amount. Then we also do have a liability increase on our premiums that we're anticipating of $2.4 million. And we are having some liability insurance issues right now. So we are looking at having rate increases that we will have to cover. So we are looking at funding that may need to be pulled from fund balance to cover. Right now, it is proposed to be used at a Measure U fund balance. It could be used elsewhere, and that's where we are looking for feedback from all of the committee members. And then we did increase our budget line item for excess claims of 1.1 million. Again, the self-insurance rate that we currently had of 250,000 was increased to 1 million. So we do have to account for that. So that's why there has been a significant increase in this as a cost driver. And then, of course, the uncontrollable PERS UAL continues to increase year after year, and that is almost a $1 million increase. And then we also follow up with regular step increases in premium pays that are excluded from the anticipated labor cost increases. So these are natural progressions. So, and then as you can see, there are more in the list, but we just wanted to highlight the top 5 drivers. So to review Measure U, we are starting the fund balance of about 11.5 million. We are expected to bring in the revenues of 16.4, and then the allocation is the 10.9 to police and 5.4 to fire. And that will increase the fund balance, but then we also need to pull down on the expenditures. So this next slide here is the police spending plan. We do have the $10.9 million that's allocated to them through the revenue share. We are expecting $14.5 million. Again, this is a draft budget, and we do want some feedback on this. This is using $1.2 million. That one is for the CityNet contract. And then there's the anticipated liability insurance at 2.4. The other cost is the internal service charges, which is anywhere from our cost allocation for general fund overhead and like for fleet maintenance, facilities, things along those lines that everybody pays into to fund the department. So after everything's said and done, they are looking at a deficit of 3.6 million. And I say deficit because it's a decrease to the fund balance. But that still leaves them a fund balance of $6.2 million available. And again, it's just a hypothetical right now. It may come in higher, it may come in lower once the actuals do occur through the fiscal year. The next slide is the spending plan for the fire department. And as you can see, their allocation is the 5.4 million. We are anticipating the salaries of almost 5 million, and then there are internal service charges of 560,000, which nets to 100% of usage. So there's no surplus or deficit. It is a net zero effect. Their fund balance comes to 1.6 million at the end of 24-25, giving a total available fund balance of 7.875 million. And looking at that number, it actually is about a 48% of our our revenue stream. So it is still sitting pretty good. It's still a healthy fund balance to have. So I just wanted to point that out as well. The next page is listing out the police department personnel. And we went ahead and we still showed the general fund allocation, the Measure U, and then any positions that are funded by special revenue, which would be like our public works CFE divisions and any kind of grant positions. So you'll see at the bottom, there is no change in the positions. We are maintaining the same amount of positions and still being able to fund the other items that we mentioned before. The next slide is the fire department's personnel, which again, this one, it remains the same from 23 to 24 and 24 to 25. And I know that we discussed at our last meeting the ratios of the challenges that the city is facing. And we identified that that is a problem, that we are not in compliance with the resolution. And we've discussed that and over options that we are trying to address that to get people hired and people on. So that is the brief overview of our spending plan for next fiscal year. And now we open it up to any kind of follow-up and discussions, comments, or concerns. And then we do ask you guys to identify either 2 to 3 committee members that would be interested in drafting the transmittal letter and bringing it back to the June 6th meeting to discuss further. And then I will be the primary point of contact, and we listed my information here. So you can either call me directly, that's my desk phone, and then my email address. And anytime you ever have questions or you wanted to go over any more in-depth items with Measure U, anything with the ACFR, with audits, we are here to answer questions and help. So with that, I conclude the presentation and open it back to you guys for questions.
Okay.
Sure.
What gets a budget if you don't hold them to it?
That is a valid statement.
That's a question.
Yeah. We have to have something in as a guidance to start out the fiscal year.
And then ignore it.
So, no, it's never ignored. There are a lot of people that play roles in maintaining a budget, so we do try our best to maintain it. I know the finance department does oversee it, but again, it is other departments' budgets that they have, that they can spend within, and sometimes it does go over.
But significantly.
In some cases, it is significant, not a lot in the
Committee,
overall picture, sure.
Committee Chair Schaefer, the city's had about seven consecutive years of budget surplus. So in aggregate, the city's general fund has seen an increase, and that's when we showed you that chart at the last meeting, where the numbers since the adoption of Measure U have moved up to $62 million at the end of June 30, 2023. That's a combination of the performance of the general fund as well as the performance of Measure U revenues in their fund reserves.
Okay,
Individual line items, there will be situations where an overtime budget is expended. And it may be offset by salary savings. That's essentially a lot of the excess revenue over expenditures in the last couple of years has been partly due to not being able to fill vacancies, particularly in the police and fire departments. And as a result, even if you spend over in a specific line item, there's still excess revenue at the end of the fiscal year. So what the council, kind of big picture, what the council has provided direction on this year is and we've completed a compensation survey, so we understand what the market looks like. And we're having trouble hiring staff in all departments, partly because the compensation isn't keeping pace with the market. And so if you watched our first budget workshop a couple of weeks ago, and then you look at the budget workshop that the council held on Tuesday, what the council did was direct us to move the investment on compensation citywide from $2.9 million to $4.6 million to ensure a more competitively paid workforce, which we're hopeful that will translate into being able to hire vacancies. So while we have 90 police officers, for example, we're down, I think, at least a dozen right now. And the same happens with fire. We're down 15-ish, almost 15 firefighters. And we believe part of that is the compensation package, because there are other nearby agencies that have more competitive salaries, and we sometimes lose existing staff and we often lose recruits, right? That otherwise would be looking to Hemet as a potential employer.
so on what basis, when the fire department overspends, does it have to come out of Mission U?
In the last year, I think we had an overage on overtime, and it dropped the fund balance a little bit on the fire. When we run the calcs on the current balance, even at the end of this year, when we look at this year, I think their reserve levels running about 28% for fire right now, so it's above the 20% guidance. And we're going to have years where the overtime is high. There were a number of reasons why it was high, and sometimes it's high because we choose. There's a service level that we want to try to achieve. And sometimes we experience vacancies within the organization where I think last year we had moments where we had people on maternity leave, injuries, and if we're already down X number of firefighters, we have to backfill with our own staff, and that drives overtime. And I know at the end of the day, we want to provide the highest level of services we can. And we did take some measures at the end of the last fiscal year to sacrifice on one of the stations. It does put an enormous burden on an already hardworking staff when we shut down something like a squad for 4 weeks. And I took the opportunity to experience that myself and was up all night on the second day, I think, of their 48-hour shift. It was a long 2 days for them.
But the question was, it's supposed to be 2/3, 1/3. If they go over, why is it a Mission U expense?
Well, it pulls down from their fund balance. So it's still pulling down from fire's fund balance. It doesn't go into police's fund balance. We still do maintain a separation and track them separately. So if it does go over, it does pull out of their fund balance, but it does go over, yes. We don't move it over to the general fund or anything along those lines. It stays within Measure U and is pulled from fund balance to cover
It
it.
shouldn't be in Measure U at all.
Overtime?
Overtime in excess of 1/3 of the revenue.
Okay,
if the positions are budgeted out of Measure U, some of these positions are budgeted out of Measure U, and those individuals work overtime, we're gonna track it out of that bucket, so to speak. But this is certainly an area where, committee member Schaefer, the committee could provide some feedback on the observation of the, use of funds. And in the case of, I think you're speaking to the fire department issue, right?
Yeah, it was $1 million plus over.
Yeah, so what we, administratively, when we learn of issues like that, we work with the department to, adjust our focus and attention to areas of organizational performance. So I know in the last fiscal year, as well as the current fiscal year, we've spent some additional time talking with the fire chief and leadership about the overtime expenditures, making sure that we track those early in the fiscal year, so we stay on budget. I do want you to know that sometimes when we send staff to help with other emergencies, those show up as overtime expenditures in our budget. The good news is we're reimbursed for all that. I think we may have talked about that at the last meeting. So it will show up as an overtime expenditure. You'll see that next year when we look at this. We're going to have, because we do have some overtime expenditures in the current year. Was Hawaii this fiscal year? Hawaii last, so we sent people for a couple weeks.
We did.
To Hawaii. We're going to be reimbursed for that. And from a net position perspective, we're giving the fire department credit for the reimbursement. And from a organizational management perspective, we're not holding them accountable for that 2 weeks of time that they went to help, because we know we'll be fully reimbursed for that. We're tracking the rest of it. They need to stay within budget. We also have, when the state uses our equipment, and we deploy, there's also some funds that come back,
Right.
and we're using that as credit, so to speak, towards
The administrative fee that we get. from
the
state.
the overall performance, economic performance of the department budget.
Is the reimbursement going into Measure U or is it going into the general fund?
It goes into both, and it's dependent.
Doesn't all the coding for mutual aid, doesn't that all run through general fund?
The coding, yeah, it does.
So I believe it all runs.
It does all go back into measure, or goes back into general fund.
And stays there?
But can you,
It does stay there, but we could track it. We would need to know what personnel's went over there for how many hours,
No, we don't do that.
how much that allocation was to be reimbursed for them, and do a transfer over to Measure U.
Can we get information on that?
Sure, yeah.
We don't run it.
oops, really heard that question.
On the CityNet contract, I still don't understand why hotel rooms, meal tickets, hotel repairs are a Measure U expense. They're not safety at all.
Oh, is that for me?
Maybe it's a little bit in the area of what we talked about last meeting. Again, I think this is something that could be included in a letter, a transmittal to the city. I do think when we look forward a year from now, or maybe a little over a year from now, we have this, we're the beneficiary of a homeless encampment grant that will transition us from a voucher program. We can still leave the vouchers in place. I don't know that that's the best environment for someone that is experiencing a difficult situation. It's better for someone in that space to be surrounded by support services. And the county is looking for a site somewhere within the vicinity of the Hemet San Jacinto Valley. They've got about 5 potential sites right now. They're trying to narrow it to a certain, a preferred location. And then they're planning to build and construct something that will have at least 30 beds. If not, they want some room to expand, so their vision is to go to 60. But our vision internally is to move those voucher dollars that we invest in vouchers to support the operational costs of supporting this new facility. So we would,
Which is
get out-
not a safety issue.
I think if you speak to our police department and we understand that.
It could be a public safety issue.
Well, this is where the city attorney can help us.
Sure. So like the city manager said, this Citizens Advisory Committee exists to review the expenditures and give your opinions on whether you believe it was an appropriate use of Measure U funds or not. So I don't know how productive it is, committee member Schaefer, for you and I to get into a philosophical debate as to whether taking police officers who normally are responsible for responding to homeless issues and bringing in some other personnel to address those issues is a public safety expense or not. The city council reviewed it and they approved it. So they felt that it was. But I'm not done, sir.
Okay,
But if this committee wanted to express its opinion that you disagreed, then you could certainly take a vote on that and include that in your letter to them. That's why you exist, to give that opinion and that advice.
what did the city council approve?
They initially approved the CityNet contract using ARPA funds, I believe.
Right?
And then I believe they continued that contract using Measure U fund balance from the police department.
But you don't know
That is-
that.
I
No, that
do
is-
know that. That is actually what happened. Yes. So they took money in the police department's Measure U fund balance. This is Measure U proceeds that have been allocated to the police department that they've been unable to expend because they weren't able to recruit or do whatever. So they had money sitting in the Measure U bank, as it were. And the city council felt that providing those homeless services was a significant public safety issue for the city. It's something that a lot of people were concerned about. And they allocated it to it on a one-time basis.
Can we get that information? The minutes from the meeting or?
Sure, I'm sure the city clerk office can provide it to you. I believe it likely was part of last year's budget adoption or something like that. And it was recommended by the chief of police. In fact, I believe he was the interim city manager at the time, right?
No, I understand. Okay. I know Chief Buss put it in there.
So, I've advised a lot of citizen advisory committees like this. I've had a city that had a similar tax situation and city council wanted to fund after-school programs with it as a way to do crime reduction. Their citizen committee had opinions on that, right? You're entitled to your opinions as a committee. I encourage you to express them.
I have a question. How much time and resources are our officers taking to handle the homeless issue before CityNet actually came into play?
So at the time, we had a unit of officers that we call the ROC unit, the Restore Our Community Strategy. And that was their primary focus, was dedicated to issues surrounding people experiencing homelessness. Since the addition to CityNet, that has freed those officers to concentrate on other areas of blight, help to clean up more homeless encampments, graffiti, special projects within the city. So that's how CityNet has assisted the police department. Those officers can now be diverted to other tasks.
And essentially, I think that was this, I don't recall the meeting exactly, but I believe that that was the city council's logic, which was, we have so many police officers. If we can take them off of this assignment and put them onto other assignments, that's essentially creating more boots on the ground handling those other issues. If non-safety personnel can handle this particular issue.
I agree 100% with the counseling portion. It's the hotel portion that I question.
Understood. And there was a robust discussion about that.
And that's,
It was presented as two different options,
and
whether to have that or not.
it's like 700,000 of the 1.2 million, maybe even 8.
I don't know the exact numbers. I do know it was presented as an alternative. Did the council want to fund the hotel program or not? And I think they had a pretty robust discussion about it. And I think ultimately what they came down to the conclusion is that putting these individuals into a situation where they have housing would significantly reduce the calls for service, the quality of life issues that the city was facing, and ultimately the number of calls that the police and fire department had to handle.
No. I think it's a good program. It's just the hotel portion.
I imagine we can't ignore the fact that there might be some EMT services that are necessary. So how's the homelessness impacting the fire department?
No, it's a great question. I mean, it certainly impacts us in terms of that total call volume. And like we talked about in the last oversight committee meeting, this is a very busy fire department already, where we're knocking on the door of 19,000 calls a year, with the majority of those being emergency medical services related. So I think certainly the steps that we're taking right now with the new position, here in the city manager's office, Christian, and working together with fire and with PD and our partners with AMR ambulance, we're trying to, do the best that we can to be proactive and really reach out and touch, those people that are experiencing homelessness issues and get them, whether it's a VA issue, a substance abuse issue, a housing issue, find that appropriate place for them. So the hope would be that, we see a decrease in the future by, instilling some of these programs. But there's certainly an impact, sure.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Does CityNet give a presentation yearly to the council on what their statistics are, their
Like did just a few meetings ago.
wins and losses, or
They,
however you want to put it?
I don't know why I became the CityNet representative. I would be very clear, our office has very little to do with CityNet other than approving the form of the contract. But I do go to city council meetings, and I think that we had the CityNet presentation 2 or 3 meetings ago. They came and had a relatively robust presentation on contacts with people, street exits, the number of homeless that we have on the streets in the city of Hemet, surrounding communities, because they do work with the other surrounding communities. I'm sure we could get that PowerPoint presentation to the members.
I was getting ready to ask you about if we could get a copy of
I
that.
saw the slow nods.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, it'd be nice because that provides us with more information instead of just the copy on page CityNet. We can now see what it is they're doing to help support police and fire.
And then the last thing I just wanted to point out, one of the things that was important to the city council was that the city have an enforceable anti-camping ordinance in the city of Hemet. The law on this may change come the end of June. This is back before this US Supreme Court. But the Ninth Circuit case in the city of Boise case held that it was a violation of the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment, to criminalize individuals for camping or sleeping in public when they have nowhere else to go. Sleeping is a necessary biological function, and if you don't have a home, and it's not a crime to not have a home, you have to sleep somewhere, and it's either on public property or it's trespassing, right? And so the court in the Ninth Circuit case held that if a city did not have sufficient beds, homeless shelter beds, or alternative places for those individuals to go, then the city would be unable to enforce its existing ordinances. So that was one of the other considerations that the council had in putting forward the hotel part of the program, which is it is a way for the city to say, look, we have beds, but you're able to do that much faster than building a shelter, right? And also I think that, building a shelter, that's a single location within the community, whereas the hotel program, you can maybe distribute it throughout the community, so there's less concentrated impacts. I neglected to mention that, but that was one of the other considerations they had as well.
I just wanted to see some of the statistics because in my other life outside of here, outside of this area, we had a similar program that the city paid for. And they got the equivalent of CityNet got great money for crappy statistics.
Sure.
And I don't see the statistics enough to calm my nerves on it. So
Well, I think have a look at that PowerPoint and the statistics. I know that the council received a presentation on it. I know they had questions as well, because they want to make sure that they're getting their money's worth out of the program.
because I know my own department, actually with City of Eureka, they went out of it, and the equivalent of Rocks, they've got 2 teams now. And with part of it being funded by mental health, because they have mental health people embedded with the officers. Because they just didn't like the
the huge amount of funds going out for not much to show. But, you know, you build a place and, you know, the old adage, you build it and they will come, was a problem up there.
Sure.
I think it'll be important for us to send you the video link in addition to the PowerPoint,
Yeah.
because the video has a presentation from Robin Gilliland. She was under contract with the city, paid for by this homeless encampment grant, to help with, as we transition to Christian Tikas. And she presents, kind of a comprehensive overview of what all that's happening on homeless mitigation efforts by the city.
Now, this is a one-time, is it gonna be a one-time next year too, and a year after that? Or where's the funding?
Yeah, this is a good
What
question.
do you do?
because This is a really important question because it also relates to the insurance premium. Just to be clear on the insurance premium, this is $2.4 million is an increase. It's an enormous increase in a single year of a premium that was last year, what number?
1.2.
1.2 million is moving to 3.6 million,
And is,
potentially higher.
is that covering the whole city's liabilities or just?
It's everything, it's everything. That's more than just the, yeah, that's for buildings and other.
Cyber.
It's not the
workers'
workers'
comp,
Like,
but-
Okay, that's just liability. It's because the claim history over the last 4 years has grown to a number that prompted the Cal JPIA to first in January increase our insurance deductible from $250,000 per incident to $1 million per incident. Our budget, by the way, at the beginning of the current fiscal year was $300,000 for deductibles, right? We're growing that to just over $1 million in the proposed budget. But one incident will wipe out that entire $1 million, right? And it may be not enough. We're still negotiating a transition to a different service provider. And that deductible may increase to 1.5 million, 1.2 million. It's hard to tell at this point what that number is going to land on. But back to your original question, with the CityNet contract and this other insurance premium, the insurance issue may last for 4 years until we have a better claims history and can work with our insurance provider or another insurance provider to reduce the cost of the premium and the SIR, the deductible. And at the same time, I think we have to be clear that this city may not be able to fully support CityNet moving forward if we can't balance, right? If we're drawing too much on fund balance, we're going to get to a point where the revenues can't support the expenditure. And we're going to have to adjust operationally how we do that. The difficulty with the insurance is that we have to, we either become self-insured, which creates additional risk and exposure with this, which the city attorney can talk to you more about.
That's another name for uninsured.
Yeah.
So,
We become uninsured and we become self-insured.
yes.
And so that becomes quite expensive if it has the potential to, one claim can do enormous damage to our general fund reserves, right? Just one incident. So we have to be very careful and we do want to be working with an insurance company rather than being self-insured.
Just to give the committee an example of how that works, this city is not stranger to significant judgments. The Toussaint case is the most recent one. Just give you the short version. A young man was crossing a street at a marked crosswalk in the city of Hemet. A gentleman was driving along the road. He was blinded by the glare of the sun, according to him, and he hit the young man, causing significant injuries. The city was found liable for the crosswalk somehow being a dangerous condition. Never really stated exactly what the dangerous condition was that would have prevented the sun glare from blinding a driver. But the city had a judgment against it, $25 million. Luckily, we had insurance and reinsurance and excess insurance. We had multiple layers of insurance that covered that. So the actual effect to the city was very small. But if we are self-insured, the city's on the hook for that entire amount. plus all of its legal defense costs. So one case like that, I mean, with not just the Measure U fund balance, but the entire reserves of the city could be wiped out. So that the insurance issue is a significant one.
And that's even private people are feeling that this year, and I just got my renewal on my home insurance. It's doubled in 2 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Set it all.
So similar issue, we're looking at not just insuring, a single home, we're looking at insuring a law enforcement operation, cyber, workers' comp for a large workforce, property liability for roads, streets, sidewalks, and aging infrastructure. So it can get very expensive.
Okay. Right, are there any more comments? Okay, so we need to identify the committee members then. Or do we need to go for a motion on this? No?
No, I think you could designate, essentially 2 to 3 people.
Okay,
And the task will be to discuss the proposed budget as we've talked about today and any issues you'd like to share, as well as comment on the topic we covered at the last meeting, the 22, 23 audited financials. And so you may have comments on that, and you can look back at the video. I think we posted that, right? On the website and, resurrect the conversation that we had at the last meeting. And then the vision is that these 2 or 3 people would draft a letter of transmittal to the city council. You'd come back a week from today, talk about what the writers have prepared, make sure that the full committee or a majority of you feel comfortable with the way it's been prepared. You would then approve it. We would take that and transmit it to the city council. It needs to be available at least 5 business days prior to the city's meeting. We're anticipating bringing the full budget to the council on June 23rd. That's the Tuesday, second Tuesday. Is that right? 28th? I'm off. June 28th. That's probably the day we'll be presenting the budget for adoption for the city council.
okay.
But we think if you come back next Thursday, you've built in 1 extra week in case, and I think the chair may have a vacation planned.
Yes,
That would allow you to complete all of this before the vacation.
yes. Okay, do we have any committee members who would like to be on this? Okay,
I'm gonna be gone probably 90% of the time this
Okay.
week.
next week, okay, so God,
I'm free, but I'm not free on the 6th. I'll be out of town on the 6th.
okay.
What is the time frame now for us to meet?
Well, the next meeting's next Thursday,
Thursday.
yes.
If we can meet between then, I'm free.
You don't need to meet in a public meeting, so these 2 or 3 people can
Yeah.
meet right after this at a coffee shop.
It can be like right afterwards and sitting
You
down.
don't need a public notice meeting for this effort, and you may go through a few iterations. It's important that you only communicate between the 2 or 3 of you, not to the rest of the committee.
Yeah.
If there's any communication or information that you would like the full committee to receive, please work through Tiffany, who will then distribute that to the full committee. And then you would come back as a full committee on presumably the 6th, or if you wanted to look for another date, we could have a discussion about an alternative date.
I'm free right now.
Okay,
Nothing going on.
so let's first get committee members for the transmittal letter.
We've got 1.
We got 1, we got 2.
I'm gonna be gone.
Could you work on it today?
Like right now?
No,
I've
okay.
got appointments after, sorry.
We've got at least 2. Is there
I
anyone
mean,
else?
I'm willing to join. I've got an hour after this meeting. I've got to be done about 5.
Okay, so I think we've got 3 right there. So you can work on it while it's fresh
Yeah.
on your mind.
it may be important to make sure that people have, that we have a quorum available
Okay.
at 3 PM on Thursday the sixth. Otherwise, we will need to look for an alternate date.
Okay, availability, are you, okay,
Sixth,
you're available,
Yeah.
okay. Available, okay, it's a no,
Norm?
Yeah, I'm good.
and I'm good.
Yeah.
So that would be 4 of us out of the 5 that are present.
You have 7, so 4 would be a quorum.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Okay.
Okay, so we'd have a quorum.
That's at 3 o'clock again, right?
Yes.
right.
Are you coming to work on the letters, please?
If you need me, because you have 3.
Okay.
I trust your judgment. Okay. That's good. I don't have to be there for it unless you desperately want me to. Okay, so are we moving ahead to the adjournment then on the agenda?
Yeah.
Next meeting, June 6th at 3 PM. We can have a quorum. Okay. All right, move to adjournment. There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned to the next Measure U Citizen Oversight Committee meeting on June 6th at 3 PM. Thank you for joining us today.
You're so smooth.
Thank you. I was like, Kelly,